Let's see, on your chant book, do you have the before Zazen thing and unsurpassed penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met? You don't have that in there?
We don't.
Okay, that's okay. Also, can I borrow a clock?
Actually, we do. It is in there.
Okay. Which page? We're looking to see if there's a chant here that we wanted to have. Doesn't matter. I'll say what it is.
Dharma verse. Oh, I had a note over it.
As
Yeah.
all of you can tell, through each day in just this short retreat, we've added a little bit more of the ritual, a little bit more ceremony each time. And today, like for example this morning, with morning Zazen and service, we're attempting to enact it in the flow that would be happening if we knew what we're doing, you know? But it was pretty nice, huh? Including all of this, you know, to just get a feel for what that's like. So I hope that it was useful. There is a Dharma verse, but it's not the one I was going to use.
It's a variation.
Uh-huh. I don't need to use it. Let's begin with our Psalms. And also, if you would, in your copy, go back to Psalm 57 that we did yesterday afternoon, because I want to make sure I help you amend the things that are wrong in it. If you go down to what is like the last long section, not the little section at the end that starts, my heart is firm, my heart is firm. That one, okay? The second line says, I sing it, I chant it. That's what that should be. And then on the last two lines of that section, I will go out among the people. See that? Not our. I will rouse the nations with my pleading. Not with your plaiting of your hair. I'm a bad editor, pardon me. Pleading. So we began on the first day with, I began by sort of avowing my own longing for consolation, comfort, and contentment in practice. And we invoked the 23rd Psalm. And I was confronted with this unexpected question because of Norman's translations. Who am I calling to? What is this you that he had substituted, whom I call on with my own anguish and hope, which you see in Psalm 46. And in practice, as I've explored my own identity with, or relationship with the universal or the divine, I'm sure you have too, through meditation and prayer and ceremonies, I actually did find myself somewhat comforted because I realized I was being met and heard in some way, sometimes in human form, but sometimes in ways that were harder to name. And I felt myself met and heard and embraced, even when the particular feelings I had didn't resolve, even when nothing was solved. And I began to realize I was being consoled in my embodiment and my feelings, not from them, not relieved from them. I was consoled in them. And I found more that I was being called to meet life as it is, to rise up and come forward wholeheartedly and graciously, no matter how I was feeling. It's not as if I'm going to work on this stuff and get worked out and then I can go forward. This practice doesn't free you from life, it frees you within it, frees you to live it. A wholehearted practice over a long period of time may not make your life more pleasant, but it will make it possible. And the final psalm that we're going to take a look at, which is, what's the number on this one? 126. I could hear when I read it the echo of the signature teaching of Zen formed as a question. Can you simply be yourself wholeheartedly? Remember that piece by Reb Anderson about coming forward and being yourself? And that blessing that I mentioned this morning that you were voicing with me. And in this psalm, I could hear the song of gratitude for being brought out from enclosure, which is both a nice personal thing, but also resonant with the Passover and many other things. And so, because I realized when I step beyond my conditioning and the habits of my reactivity, I have the opportunity to wake up from the self-centered dream and realize the freedom that comes with having remained faithful to my most troubling and compelling questions, to have been faithful to my questions. So with an equal amount of, I would say, joy and tears, I discover again and again the nourishment I hoped for as I called out for comfort on Psalm 23. And as I open to others, I can both give and receive the essential nourishment of life. I open to that flow. And as I open, I spill out my pain, and through that same opening, I'm able to drink from the kindness around me like water in an arid land. So, 126. Julia, you want to read it?
Sure. Psalm 126. This is the Norman Fisher version. When you bring us out from enclosure, we will be like dreamers, our heads thrown back with laughter, our throats vibrating with song. And the others will say, yes, great happenings have happened to them, the ones who have struggled along with their questions. Yes, great things would have happened to us, and we would be dizzy with the joy of them, drunk on water in an arid land. Our tears, our joys seen. We'd go out weeping and come back singing, our arms full of sheaves.
Nancy? Again? Read again.
On 126. When you bring us out from enclosure, we will be like dreamers, our heads thrown back with laughter, our throats vibrating with song. And the others will say, yes, great happenings have happened to them, the ones who have struggled, along with their questions. Yes, great things would have happened to us, and we would be dizzy with the joy of them, drunk on water in an arid land. Our tears are joy's seed. We go out weeping and come back singing, our arms full of shoes.
And one more time, you might have to help. Emily, on the Emily that's online.
Yes.
Okay, I think he has you now.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Please.
When you bring us out from enclosure, we will be like dreamers, our heads thrown back with laughter, our throats vibrating with song. And the others will say, yes, great happenings have happened to them. The ones who have struggled long with their questions. Yes, great things would have happened to us, and we would be dizzy with the joy of them, drunk on water in an arid land. Our tears, our joy's seed, would go out weeping and come back singing, our arms full of sheaves.
About a bell. That deserves a bell, I think, these 3 readings. And as I was working with this, I, like some sort of silent messenger, this following quote arrived in email from Mark Nepo, deepening for me the message of Psalm 126 in the path of profound self-acceptance. That, you know, I don't know about you, but I have to be reminded often of this. Like, when in doubt, accept yourself. And that my commitment is, you know, to remember over and over, not to cling to what I remember. And I have to discipline myself to taking my time, learning to soften into strength. To soften into strength. And to craft a particular kind of space for the inevitability of fear and vulnerability. This is the space of surrender to life as it is, to the way we need to meet each other profoundly in the endless beauty of loss and love. This isn't Mark's, this is me, by the way, this part. But that's what I was feeling. These are his words. Most of our searching is looking for ways to discover who we really are. Thus, we continually run into mountains and rivers, into the farthest seas and into the arms of strangers. And some of us lead simple lives, hoping to practice how not to forget. But part of our journey is this forgetting and remembering. So what can we do? Well, it's no secret that slowness remembers and hurry forgets. That softness remembers and hardness forgets. That surrender remembers and fear forgets. It is beautifully difficult to remember who we truly are. But each time we help each other fill the cup of truth and hold each other after drinking it, I love that image, we find the essence that always holds us. And I wanted to have this be our last song because it just seemed like what we've created, you know, that kind of beauty. I would like to continue with our core teaching, which is the Fukan Zazengi, as the ritual and ceremonialized container for these teachings. I think that you may have, we don't need to look at it right now, but you may have received by email. Did they get this?
Yes.
An excerpt from Zenju Earthland Manual's book, The Shamanic Bones, about a prolonged ritual of seeing and listening on the forms of Zen. It talks about Zazen. You may not have it in printed, you may, but look at that sometime. It's nice. I sort of echoed it this morning a bit when we were sitting, hopefully. But what I'd like for you to do is look at this longer thing called A Ceremony for the Encouragement of Zazen.
For those online, it would be attachment number 4.
I'm sorry? Who was asking what?
Oh, for those online, that you received it as an attachment in email, it's attachment number 404.
Just do that.
Did you send it to me?
Yeah.
You did? Pardon me for a moment, because I don't want to have to be rustling papers around. I'd rather be able to see it. That's a revised handout. Person retreat. Oh, there we go. There it is right there. Pardon me. Okay, we're going to go through this, if you don't mind, because I think it's quite illuminating and sometimes very surprising, you know? And so this first kind of longish paragraph on the first side that begins, Zazen is the source. Would you read this, Ryan, for us?
Should I turn on the microphone? Zazen is the source of all the teachings and practices of the Buddha way.
What is the thing I should turn off?
Zazen is the source of all the teachings and practices of the Buddha way. Although the word Zazen literally means sitting concentration, it is not limited to concentration practice. All enlightened concentration practices emanate from and return to Zazen. Here, one's mind is concentrated without relying on any contrivance and is not necessarily focused continuously on any particular object. There are concentration practices, and if one is practicing thus, Zazen is just being upright and unmoving in the midst of such a practice. If one is not practicing concentration, it is just sitting still in the middle of not practicing concentration. It is simply pure presence untouched by all human agency.
Read that line again.
It is simply pure presence untouched by all human agency. Many people attempt to concentrate their minds and according to their own definition are unsuccessful. Practicing concentration in this way often leads to feeling frustrated and upset. Even if one is successful in achieving concentration by personal effort, the mind is still somewhat disturbed by such striving. In Buddha's meditation, there is no such striving.
Read that one again.
In Buddha's meditation, there is no such striving. Giving up the desire to pacify the mind pacifies the mind.
So that first paragraph is quite enough, isn't it? A lot in that. that I hope you'll return to. And some things that sound odd, you begin to get the idea that Dogen is certainly echoing in the Fukan Zazengi that this Zazen thing is not ordinary meditation. And it's one of the things that confuses us. For example, when you were asking about passivity, like what do you know, that often is based on the idea that meditation is somehow that turning in or trying to change. Zazen is not that. And we hear that going forward. This next longish paragraph, once again, let's see if we can get Suzanne to read. You there, Suzanne? You're willing to do that one?
She unmute herself.
She need to unmute herself.
Yes.
For this reason, if I give beginner Zazen instruction, although I usually suggest that they sit upright with the spine straight, eyes open, and hands in the cosmic concentration mudra, I do not encourage bending the mind into concentrating on the posture or breathing, nor do I discourage it. If someone asks for instruction on how to concentrate on posture or breathing, I am happy to give detailed instruction on how to practice that way. Although concentration practices may be wonderfully beneficial and develop great mental skill, trying to concentrate on some object, such as breath, may activate a gaining idea. Gaining ideas are antithetical to the whole project of Mahayana Buddhism, which is to be concerned for others' welfare rather than our own self-improvement.
That's one
However,
worth repeating, right? That line? That's one's worth repeating.
gaining ideas are antithetical to the whole project of Mahayana Buddhism, which is to be concerned for others' welfare rather than our own self-improvement. However, we may not realize this right from the start of our practice. As long as we are engaged in a self-improvement meditation, we continue to be trapped in ourselves. When we are free of self-improvement projects, we are free of ourself.
Tell that to your therapist. What's it like just to read that, Suzanne? Because you're a teacher, you're giving instruction a lot.
Well, this is really interesting for me because I have a couple of students who are asking me for beginning meditation practice. And when I read Reb Anderson's piece earlier this week, I thought, oh, okay. So I'm doing okay with it, but this was very helpful to be both affirming, but also some very good guidance.
Right.
Yeah.
And he then gives a little softer ramp on this, and this is probably who hasn't read that wants to read? Somebody want to read? Yeah, please read the next one for us, okay?
Although it may be difficult to wholeheartedly concentrate on an object without getting caught in some self-serving gaining idea, it is also true that having a gaining idea may be an important step in one's cultivation and realization of a practice that is free of all such gaining ideas. Such practice may help us to forge a strong enough container to tolerate a non-gaining approach to meditation.
That's an important turning question of that sentence, isn't it? Say that one again.
Such practice may help us to forge a strong enough container to tolerate a non-gaining approach to meditation. It frequently happens that if a practitioner pushes personal effort to the limit in a wholesome way, as in concentration practice, they can realize the futility of depending on personal power and then find another entrance into Zazen.
Each of these paragraphs is pretty rich, isn't it? Yeah. Is this touching something in you when you read it?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it finds a gentleness to those things that have an agenda that say, that want to move me forward towards freedom and healing and you know, those things. And then says, okay, get us started. And then let go. That's the image that's coming to me, or maybe not let go, but then, you know, submit, then, you know, come return. This, and it calms the critical parts of me that are like, oh, you have an agenda to heal, you know, that I noticed in myself, and you know, irritated with it because knowing that that's in my way. And so it calms those parts. Just,
Thank you.
yeah, that's what it's.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You know, what you're speaking to is so essential, and it's why at this point in the reading, I'll say, and you've heard me say this before, I think, most of you here, is why I developed that concept of the double helix, of growing up and waking up. Because, and many of you heard me say this before, that as a psychotherapist, I spent all these years watching people do great work. Thank goodness. And I dedicated myself to training so I could assist people. But as long as they were looking only at sort of like what was wrong and what they could fix, that you get locked in loops of self-identification and self-reflection. And if there's not a non-dual practice, you can't ever step beyond it. It's always the same kind of reflection. But it's essential. And then I go to monasteries and temples and watch people practice the Dharma, understand it, read it, teach it well. And when they sit and all this stuff comes up from trauma or whatever, they have no idea what to do with it. And just sitting doesn't help. It's not enough. I mean, what are some of the foundations of trauma? You can't move, you can't say anything about it. We say, sit down and shut up. Like that re-traumatizes you, if that's all you have. But you put those two things together, of a deep willingness to cultivate kindness and wisdom and compassion for self, and the ability to step beyond and actually look at what the self is that you can get trapped in. And then you have the capacity to grow up psychologically and wake up spiritually towards the ultimate goal of awakening, which is maturity. Maturing fully as a ripe human being, with both the enlightenment side, the beauty, what gets illuminated by practice, and endarkenment. The ability to go deep down and mine out of all of our stuff the treasures that are there. And enlightenment and endarkenment create awakening. The enlightenment's only half the picture. So, thank you. I'd like to read the next little paragraph. Yes. Yeah.
Zazen I speak of is neither concentration practice nor not concentration practice. Zazen does not prefer success over failure. Zazen does not prefer enlightenment to delusion. If we are enlightened, we sit still in the middle of enlightenment. with no preference for it. If we are deluded, we sit still in the middle of delusion with no aversion to it. This is Buddha's Zazen.
What? This is the paragraph, this is the pivotal moment, isn't it? Okay, I'm gonna read it back to you and I'm gonna read it backwards. Okay? What is Buddha Zazen? Buddha Zazen is knowing that we're deluded and sitting still in the middle of that delusion with no aversion to it. And if we have moments of enlightenment, we sit still in the middle of that enlightenment with no preference for it. Because Zazen does not prefer enlightenment over delusion. Zazen does not prefer success over failure. So the Zazen we're speaking about here isn't about concentration practice or not concentration practice. This is Buddha Zazen. This is crucial. This turns what we think of as meditation on its head, right? And there's nothing wrong with meditation. This isn't a polemic. This is just pointing us to Dogen's essential practice. Thank you. And the next paragraph? Yes?
The goal of Zazen practice is the enlightenment and liberation of all living beings from suffering. That is the goal of Zazen, but the goal is exactly the same as the practice. In realizing this goal, one becomes free of self-concern and personal gain. Becoming free of self-concern and personal gain realizes the goal.
Well, so that's weaving, 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 weaving. Maybe just read it again.
Okay. The goal of Zazen practice is the enlightenment and liberation of all living beings from suffering.
So that's what he's talking about right there, okay?
That is the goal of Zazen, but the goal is exactly the same as the practice.
What's that mean?
Am I supposed to tell you?
Sure. You know, in that third recitation of the Bodhisattva vow, on the last line, we say, Buddha's way is unsurpassable. This vow embodies it. So go ahead.
I'll read that sentence again. That is the goal of Zazen, but the goal is exactly the same as the practice. In realizing this goal, one becomes free of self-concern and personal gain. Becoming free of self-concern and personal gain realizes the goal.
What was that little shake of your head?
It's hard for me to take it in when I'm reading it aloud. So it's like,
Oh, well, you want somebody to read it to you?
sure, let me read it again.
I'll read it to you. So I'm going to read it as if I'm just, like this is something I'm just telling you. You know, you realize that the goal of Zazen practice that we've been doing is the enlightenment and liberation of all living beings from suffering. And you kind of know that, right? You get that. The thing about it is that the goal of Zazen, this liberation, is exactly the same as the practice. Like when we're sitting, when I'm sitting upright and engaged, I'm offering myself to the practice. I'm no longer caught in self-concern and personal gain because I'm not doing what I want to do. I'm not trying to feel better and make it, I'm releasing myself to this practice and being free of self-concern at that moment. Suddenly, that's actually the embodiment of the goal. In realizing the goal, one becomes free of self-concern and personal gain. Becoming free of self-concern and personal gain realizes the goal.
So I have work to do because I'm still worried about my personal goals when I'm sitting there.
Yeah.
And that would be the work is.
And that's okay.
Free of that.
But the sitting, if you offer your body and to the sitting, it's like, I heard Pima Chodron say one time, when I sit up here, like I'm sitting, and I look out at you, and she has lots of people out there, like 200-300, she says, it looks like a sea of Buddhas. But I know it's a madhouse out there. but the expression with your body of your Buddha nature is your true nature, even though all that stuff is still going on. All that stuff doesn't have to stop going on so you can find yourself as a Buddha. Buddhas are the space in which all that can go on and not be caught by it. So let's go on and see. What next? Who can read? Yeah, there you go.
Although one might joyfully practice concentrating on posture and breathing with no gaining idea, still, Zazen is not limited to this form of practice. As our ancestor Dogen said, Zazen is totally culminated enlightenment. Traps and snares can never reach it. Once its heart is grasped, you are like the dragon when he enters the water, like the tiger when she returns to the mountain. In other words, Zazen survives every reduction. It cannot be reduced or trapped into mindfulness or mindlessness of the breath or of the posture. It cannot be captured by any activity of the human body or mind.
And you know, the image that he's calling on there, are that the thought in the mythology was that dragons lived in the water, so that's like returning home. And the tiger lived in the mountains, so she'd be returning home, be in your natural environment. That's all that it's saying. And that Zazen, we think, is like this meditative thing we're doing, but that's a ceremony that expresses what Zazen is, which is not reducible to anything we can conceive of. Blanche said she was taught the breathing practice, in the beginning, you just follow your breath, especially your exhalations, as a way to enter Zazen, as a normal. And she went to see Suzuki Roshi for Dokusan for practice discussion, and she was so excited. She said, for the entire 40-minute period, they're sitting 40 minutes at a time, I followed my breath counting the whole time. It was so wonderful to be able to doing Zazen. And she said he almost came up off of his seat. Don't ever think you are doing Zazen. Zazen does Zazen. Anything else in there you wanted to comment on?
Just in general, there's a lot of paradoxes going on here.
In response to those kinds of questions, once Suzuki Roshi said, if it's not paradoxical, it's probably not true. Because we are stepping into the absolute, which is large enough to contain this and that. So you're right on track. Thank you for saying that. Next paragraph. And online, if you guys raise your hand, happy to read. I'd love to hear anybody. Is there anybody here? If not, you have to listen to me. Yes.
Zazen doesn't start when we start making effort. It doesn't stop when we stop.
Oh, this is what you're doing? Okay, go ahead.
However, when practicing Zazen, there is complete mindfulness, and we may very well notice that we are breathing. It's not that our ordinary awareness isn't going on. It's just that the practice does not abide in it and cannot be defined by the things we are aware of at the moment. As the great teacher Prajnatara said, this poor wayfarer, when breathing in, does not abide in the realms of body or mind, and when breathing out, does not get entangled in the various objects of experience. I always recite this scripture. The breath of Zazen is to be thoroughly intimate with and liberated through all realms of experience. This is the breathing of Buddha. Still, we may need to familiarize ourselves with and become proficient in the forms of concentration on breath and posture in order to develop enough confidence to selflessly practice the formless breathing of this poor wayfarer.
Once again, he's going back and forth between yes, you exert effort and you do these things, and that's the intricate. That's not the essence of. Anything else in there you want to comment on?
No, it's
Yeah, there's, let's see, where's that sentence? I love the way he says, and we very well may notice that we're breathing. It's not that our ordinary awareness isn't going on, it's just that the practice does not abide in and cannot be defined by the things we're aware of at the moment. This is what I was talking about the other day, about awareness that isn't the object of our consciousness, isn't focused just on the objects of our consciousness. It's awareness only. It's a clear mirror.
Say something?
Yes.
I love this last little sentence here about we still may need to familiarize ourselves with and become proficient in the forms of concentration on breath and posture. I wrote down the line you said a little bit ago. Basically, I paraphrased it. I don't have to feel good or be regulated to also be with my true Buddha nature.
Right.
Which is great.
Well, dysregulation and discomfort is an expression of Buddha nature.
It is, right. But I hate it, right? So I don't want
And
to.
the one who hates it is also part of that.
Exactly. And so that's so refreshing.
Nothing's left out.
Hear that and see that. So I can be a madhouse in here.
Yeah.
And also have, and at the same time, I think of my journey with sitting and how, even to sit still years ago was torture.
Mhm.
Right, all the feedback static in this body mind of mine, right? And that I what I love is this care for the animal body
Yeah.
in Madhouse.
Yeah.
That it's not about removing it, eradicating it, trying to make it different. It's about knowing it, and allowing it, and then seeing what else happens. Maybe shifts, maybe not.
The way I say it is, this practice doesn't result in you getting a bunch of new, better experiences. It helps you be at home and free in all experience. Make it refined. Now I get the good stuff. People in Enlightenment is very disappointed. And that's why he said in that sentence, this gives you enough confidence to step into a selfless practice. It isn't just about affecting yourself.
I remember, during the uprisings in Minneapolis here, we live in South Minneapolis, how afraid my body was. I would literally just shake. I was just shaking every day, every night, so scared. And I was mad because I couldn't regulate it and let it go and find that inner peace. So it's interesting. I do remember still feeling something of that center, even in my fear.
Yes.
And that's incredible to me. So now I know that can be true.
That's the pivotal moment.
Mhm.
It was shocking to me when there was a moment in which I felt upset, distressed, all these things, and I was completely okay.
Yes.
At the very same time, I was sort of like, what? And then the next paragraph begins to speak to this. I would like to read the next paragraph. Come on.
Zazen is formless like vast space, yet it manifests forms in response to living beings, like the moon reflected in water. Because we may need forms to help us relate to the formless, when people first come to learn about Zazen at a Zen center, they are given instructions in how to perform a formal ceremony of Zazen. Beginners usually want to have some activity they can do, so we can give them something to do. However, the Zazen of our school is not something we can do. The ceremony is for tempering our tolerance for a formless practice that we cannot do. Strictly speaking, awakened Buddhist meditation is not an action done by a person. It is not another form of doing, not another form of karma. It is the function of enlightenment, the concerted activity of the entire universe.
Blowing your mind, huh? And the weirdest thing about it is you're starting to read this and go, and that's what's weird. Isn't it?
It is.
I actually think that that's true and it makes sense to me, but not a sense I can say. I can see it, right? What would you say about it? Any particular line jump out at you?
There's a function of time, a function of maturity, a function of circumstance. All of those things for every individual are different. And this is the truth.
And that's all. Formless like vast space, yet it manifests forms in response to living beings. That line right there, enough, isn't it?
That's the one I'm struggling with. I think there's something beautiful and poetic there, and I'm like, at the moon, you know, so what's that metaphor? I can't understand that line.
About the moon?
About this, well, that whole sentence, yeah.
Mhm.
How is Zen formless like vast space? It manifests forms in response to living beings. Yeah, I don't know why I'm so perplexed by that.
Well, that's okay. That's a really good one. That's one of those questions that be ashamed to answer, kind of, because you're right on the edge of something really crucial. It's why the Heart Sutra talks about balances as forms balances. That's what it's talking about. Here's a little riff. It's not difficult for you to understand impermanence, right?
Right.
Yeah, everything changes, and not only, it's not like there are things that are solid in here and then they go away. There aren't any solid things, actually. Everything is transition, everything is movement, everything is dynamic. And that's the next thing, interdependence. Everything mutually arises, mutual causality. Everything is a result of everything else around it. So that's starting to push you out there, you know? So every form is a result of everything else. So it's boundless. But how do we know about boundlessness? By the forms that it produces. You know the famous Thich Nhat Hanh thing about paper? You know that image?
No.
It's what is this? Yeah, paper. What is it made out of? And
Song,
and where did the trees come from?
right.
And who cut down the trees? And what were those people doing that day? And how was it shipped? And where did it come to? And where does that end? There is no end. Because every single thing you say has a million. This thing we call paper is made of non-paper elements.
Marvelous.
This form comes from formlessness. This isn't a little example of ultimate reality. It is ultimate reality. Expressed in this form. And it's the same for you. You're not a little bit of ultimate reality. You're all of it expressed in that form at this particular time in this particular circumstance. We're all the same. If we took one of these chairs and you broke the legs off of it and you set it out here and somebody said, "What is that?" You'd say, "Well, it's a broken chair." But how far do you have to break it down to where there isn't any chairness left? We only call it a chair because of the form. It's made out of these elements. And then suddenly the thing we call chair doesn't exist anymore, but nothing happened. Nothing went anywhere. It's just rearranged. And the same with us. Some of you have received this thing I give out, which is a eulogy from a physicist. In the final line, it's a beautiful eulogy of this. It says, the person you love is now gone. They haven't gone anywhere. They're just less organized.
Just what?
Less organized.
Less organized.
So is this helping?
Yes.
Good, okay. That's my job. Who wants to read the next paragraph? Somebody raise their hand, maybe no one, maybe?
Okay. Conventionally speaking, Zen students say, now I am going to the meditation hall to do Zazen. However, the formal actions that you or I perform in assuming the traditional bodily posture of sitting meditation are not actually the Zazen of the Buddha ancestors. Their Zazen has nothing to do with sitting or lying down. These ritual forms that we humans practice are a ceremony by which we express and celebrate our devotion to the actual reality of Zazen.
It's so interesting, Ellen, that you decided to read this one. Because knowing you for so many years, you really express this.
Well, thank you, Flint. It was very moving to me to read this.
I could tell, and like I said, I can understand why it would be, having been with you for so long. Because of course we go into the Zendo and we follow the forms in order to engage Zazen, knowing that that's not actually the Zazen of the Buddha ancestors. And that these rituals are these ceremonies, but we offer ourselves to the ceremony, and that ceremonies take us in a new way, don't they? Anything else you want to say about this one?
No, that's quite complete for me. Thank you.
I think you did. Except, you know what? Why don't you read the next paragraph too? It's not very long. It helps you continue what you just said. So.
The ceremonial forms are opportunities for people to embrace and be embraced by the inconceivable totality of Zazen. They are Dharma gateways for the body and mind to manifest the truth of Zazen. The forms are ways for Zazen to come into the body in accord with the mind.
Yeah. And the response after years of practice is yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next paragraph. I think I'm going to read this one, okay? This is the teacher's paragraph. When people are sitting during the ceremony of Zazen, I sometimes walk around the room adjusting their posture. You know, we don't do this here because you're not sitting facing the wall and it's not quite as strict. This is a temple thing. The adjustment is intended as a silent comment on their posture. Although I'm inspired by the beauty of people's effort in sitting upright and still, nonetheless, I may have some suggestions that encourage more wholehearted devotion to the ceremony of Zazen. In other words, bring yourself fully into it is what this is about. You don't casually sit around waiting. And I'm going to continue. The posture of our body reflects our participation in the ceremony. The posture of our body reflects our participation in the ceremony. The posture of our body reflects the participation in the ceremony and our participation in the entire universe. Giving our posture entirely to the ceremony, we give ourselves entirely to the universe. Total devotion to one is total devotion to the other. Man. Resistance to one is resistance to the other. On the other hand, if our spines are curved or hunched over, then our chests are caved in and our lungs are constricted. Our hearts are withdrawn. On the other hand, if our spines come deeper into our torsos so that we're sitting more upright, then we have more room for breathing and our hearts come forward. We feel more alive. And feeling more alive, we're open and vulnerable to the suffering and enter more deeply into the joyful and vital realm of Dharma. This is also what that last psalm talks about. Yeah? That's what Next small paragraph. Let's read that one. Yes, ma'am.
When a person fully accepts their suffering by assuming this upright posture, they are released. Working with our posture in this way encourages us to fully experience what it means to have a body, to fully enter our own mental presence.
That first sentence is not a small injunction, is it? Read the other first sentence.
When a person fully accepts their suffering by assuming this upright posture, they are released.
Wow. And most people think I'm trapped. You're gonna make me sit Zazen. I have to wait for the bell. I don't feel comfortable. By accepting their suffering. It makes sense or not? It's kind of one of those weird ones.
I think it might be the reason people come back.
It is like that story I told about it was horrible. And I came back.
Yeah.
And do you remember the little story I talked about with Blanche in Japan? When we were practicing in this old way, and it was harsh. I don't mean it was sadistic or anything, but it was challenging. And I went to see her for Dokusan one morning, early, it's still dark, this little tea house at Rinsu-in, and I said knee to knee to her. And I said, if this is a practice for reduction and release of suffering, why do we do things that hurt so much? And she laughed, looked down, she looked right at me and said, because you're practicing to know how to meet the pain that doesn't stop when the bell rings. Next paragraph.
Susanna's hand raised.
Okay. I like it when you spotlight them, they're so big.
So these last two paragraphs have me think of an interview I heard earlier this week with an actor that said something I found extraordinary. He says that when he meditates, he grieves globally, but he thrives locally. And it reminded me so much when I thought about it today, even yesterday, it reminded me of Marla taking the inquiry chair and saying what she said. I'm so grateful to her because we had just had that conversation in our meditation on Wednesday, this previous Wednesday. And that in order to open up, and I think, what this last piece said about opening up to our suffering. When we sit, we open up to our suffering. When we have a devotion to the ceremony, we open up to our suffering, but we're also opening up to all suffering.
The suffering.
The suffering. That's a good way to put it. The suffering.
You know what? That's also what the pain in your body is. Because you notice that sometimes you sit in Zazen and you hurt like hell. And then the next time you sit down, it doesn't hurt. It's like, so that doesn't make any sense physically.
No,
it isn't your pain. It's the pain and it moves around. Some of it's your pain, sure. But I'm glad you said that, Marla. Why don't you get up and go bow to her? And she'll bow back. Thank you. Anybody in here got worried about doing the right thing or the wrong thing in these forums? No? And so then you have to read the next one. You raise your hand. Do you mind?
God, it's a long one. I might do it. I might do it wrong.
Perfect.
Okay.
You got some parts coming up.
Yes, I do. However, when people mistake the ceremony for Zazen itself, they may develop a sense that there is a right way and a wrong way to practice Zazen. Thus, they may be uncomfortable entering a meditation hall because they don't want to do the wrong thing. For such people, the trap of thinking in terms of right and wrong can be undermining and distracting. So I might refer some of them to a less formal or ceremonial form of meditation. This way, they can relax into sitting and walking meditation without getting caught up in worrying about the concepts of right and wrong. Perhaps after body and mind are calm and stabilized by practicing a less ceremonial form of meditation, one might be able to return to formal Zen practice and deal fruitfully with any complications around issues of right and wrong, which might arise in response to these formalities.
Yeah. And that's what I've been doing with all of you for 5 years.
Exactly.
Let's start gently and humanly in the way you know how to start. And then the weirdest thing happens. You start asking for the form. It's like, oh, you want a little more? Okay. And look where it got you. But it's not required. And we go back and forth. And we build slowly and gently. And of course, the things will come up as all you have to do is you read the instructions on how to do the bells and you know it completely. But then when the thing is in your hand, what happens?
You know nothing.
You go stupid. Right.
Don't
Just
ask
the way it goes. Anything else you want to say about that? Yeah, good. It's a good one, huh? Yeah. Next. Who's ready for the next one?
Are we?
Okay.
For other people, the ceremonial forms provide a structure or refuge in which they can tolerate the formless, objectless practice of Zazen. The ritual forms are a vessel in which they may enter into the inconceivable activity of enlightenment.
Yeah, that's the more traditional way of thinking about it. And when I talk about the embodied inconceivable. And that's why sometimes we do these things that you don't really understand, but as you engage them or witness them, you're moved. It's like, what's happening?
Kind of like biofeedback, maybe like when you practice something for a while and drop into that.
Mm-hmm. This is Buddha feedback.
Yeah.
So read the next one.
The meaning of Zazen is not limited to the ceremony, but manifests in response to our devotion to the ceremony.
Oh, that's a good one.
As the song of the jewel mirror Samadhi says, the meaning is not in the words, yet it responds to the arrival of energy.
Recognize that phrase? Yeah.
It manifests in response to the arrival of our energetic effort and devotion.
We just keep offering ourselves to the ceremony and things come. That's some of what Shelley and I were talking about the other day, but bowing.
One of the fundamental texts of our school is the great teacher Gogan's Ceremony for the Universal Encouragement of Zazen, the Fukan Zazengi. The Chinese word for ceremony in the title of this work is composed of 2 characters. The first character means person, and the second means justice, righteousness, or meaning. The ceremony provides an opportunity for the person to be united with the meaning of Zazen. Zazen is the selfless practice that comes to meet our sincere devotion. Ceremony of Zazen. Instructions are basically established procedures for a formal ceremony that we may perform in a meditation hall or at home. But Zazen survives every reduction. That cannot be reduced to that ceremony. Zazen is happening all the time and everywhere. We do the ceremony within particular limits of time and space to celebrate the limitless, all-pervasive reality of Zazen. This ceremony, central ritual act of the Zen school. In the Zen monastery, we may practice this ceremony all day long, but it is still just a ceremony, not the totality of Zazen itself. Performing the ceremony heals any gap between our lives and the true Zazen practice of Buddha.
What you have to say for yourself. You can teach what I want for a long time, but still just a ceremony. That's why we come in and bow, do all these ritual things. It's a ceremony to express something. It's not like, oh, now we're going to get ready to meditate.
There's one that jumps out at me.
Yeah.
Personally, maybe important for us where we are too, but personal to me. Zazen is the selfless practice that comes to meet our sincere devotion to the Spirit.
Yes, it comes to meet us by our sincere offering ourselves.
Yeah.
That's how it comes.
And it's not it's a coming together. Kind of put this way, it's like opposing forces, but not conflictual forces. It's coming, and there's a merge.
The character for intimacy that Gogan uses means like meets like. It's not, you don't lean in, you know, wait, it's like you just meeting. That's what you realize.
In this ceremony, we try to be thoroughly mindful of every detail of our bodily posture and movement. We have a formal and traditional way of entering the meditation hall, walking to our seats, bowing to our cushions, and taking our places. We sit on our cushions according to instructions on 7 points of posture that we find in meditation texts throughout Buddhist history. And then we follow the instruction that says, take a deep breath, inhale and exhale, rock your body right and left, and settle into a steady, immobile sitting position.
This is the description of what we do. The next paragraph.
Zazen practice is selfless. Its meaning, the enlightenment and liberation of all living beings, is not brought forth by the power of personal effort, and is not brought forth by the power of some other. We can't do it by ourselves, and nobody else can do it for us. The meaning is realized interactively in the context of our wholehearted effort. As the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi says, inquiry and response come up together. The meaning arises at the same moment as our devotion to the ceremony. Because the meaning arises simultaneously with the performance of the ceremony, there can be no awareness of the actual meaning separate from the form of the ceremony itself. Therefore, although the meaning of Zazen can be realized, it is inconceivable. Because enlightenment is realized right at the same time as the selfless practice of this ritual, it is a ceremony of inconceivable liberation.
Beautiful, huh? And that's also what CJ was just saying about the meeting. Let's just continue through to the end. Who wants to read the next one?
Yes.
I see that hand waving.
Oops. The stillness of Buddha's sitting is not merely stillness. It is a complete presence in stillness. In such presence, there is not the slightest meddling with what's happening. It is a physical and mental non-interfering with our experience. It is a thorough intimacy with whatever is happening. This is an infinitely flexible stillness that can adjust to the impermanent nature of all things, harmonizing with all situations.
The essence of Zazen is when we relinquish all manipulation whatsoever. And often when we meditate, we're told how to manipulate our experience so things will get different. And so we shouldn't ring the bell and say we're going to have 30 minutes of meditation. We should say we have 30 minutes of manipulation. And in Zazen, that's not the case. It's a beautiful paragraph, isn't it? What's moving in you as you read it?
I think my soul's greatest desire is to be able to meet every experience where it is and how it is. And yet I feel so utterly inept in that capacity.
Welcome to the club. Yeah, exactly. So now what you just said is you're living by vow. You understand what your vow is, which is the Bodhisattva vow. You understand how you always fall short, and that's the way it goes. And that's what we continue. Together. Together. Awakening together. With our joys and our sorrows. And as you're expressing it very beautifully now. Thank you. Next paragraph. Okay.
Although this upright stillness is an essential awareness, nevertheless, it is an initiatory awareness. It opens the door to a full understanding of how and other dependently will produce each other. This understanding of the interdependent arising of all beings is the samadhi
of all Buddhas.
samadhi of all Buddhas. In this realm of awareness, that is the culmination of Zen practice, the liberation of all beings is realized. The cumulative.
Yeah. So this is getting more to the absolute now, taking us further out. You can have your own awareness, which really does open up, and that's actually just the gateway. That's the stepping off 100. It's going to be wisdom beyond wisdom. It's what it allows us to do. And if you want to make that step, then Zazen is your deal. Go for it. The last paragraph, yes.
Zazen is completely free. It is formless and no person or school owns it. Yet the most essential and intimate aspect of training in the formless Zazen of Buddha ancestors occurs in the realm of form. In this regard, I deeply appreciate how the forms of sitting practice can help us develop wisdom and compassion.
True, we made it. A lot, isn't it? You can see how you can come back to this over. And it really is clear. Also see what we're doing, which is different than just a meditation practice that's based on Buddhist principles to help us get over something. It's not, this takes us way beyond that. It includes that. It takes us beyond that. So you've been sitting here a long time. I have too. Someone said, see, when did we start the Dharma talk at 11? Yeah. And someone said, you sit here an hour and a half. I would say, no, man, that's too long. But engaged in this with you, how can I do it? Now there's something to this, isn't there? There's something to it. But we do need to move. And so during this the Dharma activity that we're going to do now, it's called another break. Because we've been sitting here a long time and there's an awful lot of stuff. So I want you to have time to integrate. And well, I want you to watch something. When we've been this contained, especially with this much form and ceremony we've done today, and this much depth, and study, it's easy to kind of explode out of it. You know, to kind of get busy and get active and get loud really quick. I don't want you to not interact. I want you to, but watch the tendency to swing. Be gentle with yourself and be gentle with each other by being gentle with the form and the energy that you're carrying now, because it's precious. Not precious, you know that. It's important. You know what I mean? So enjoy each other and enjoy this time for the next half hour. I believe that's how much time we have, right?
Should we come back before lunch?
Oh, that's right. We've taken it all the way there, haven't we? Yeah, 20 minutes, and we come back for the last 10 minutes, okay? We'll have clappers so you'll know. Thank you for your patience and for your participation.